They say you cannot conquer what you will not confront. This is very true for our guest, Sharetta Donalson, a mother, a wife, a nurse, and now an author of her book, Forgiveness, A Quest to Healing Your Heart, which shares her shocking story of her life filled with abuse, sexual assault, and violence, all at the hands of her father.
My father yelled back, and he would say, if you leave out this house, I'm going to kill your mother.
On this episode of I Am Ready to Talk Now, we talk to Sharetta as she recounts the chilling events she had to endure in a home at such an early age.
I knew while I was being molested that I would tell my story. I knew while I was being molested that my story was going to inspire people.
Sharetta says she's coping with the trauma, but is empowered to share her story to give a voice to others who have had their voices silenced. Join us now for an episode of I Am Ready to Talk Now.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. This book, Forgiveness, The Quest for Healing Your Heart. Mm-hmm. I love the title. How did you come up with that?
I always knew that the title would be Forgiveness, but it took more time to come up with the subtitle. I had to just think about what I wanted to convey, what message I wanted to convey to my readers, and what part of me that I wanted to show them. So that's how we came up with the Quest for Healing Your Heart.
And you know what? I have a couple of notes here, and we're going to dive right in.
Okay.
When you first opened this book, one of the things that you say is it started off with the spring of 1981 with your mother screaming.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I was born in 73, so up until 81, I lived a pretty normal life and a pretty normal childhood. We did a little bouncing around. My father was in the Air Force, so we did a little living on the Air Force base for one time. Then we lived next to my grandmother at one time. We lived in the projects at one time. So aside from that, it was pretty normal. So that night that you're referring to, I was awakened by my mother's screams, and she was basically telling me to get out the house. And as she screamed, my father yelled back, and he would say, if you leave out this house, I'm going to kill your mother. So I was only 7. I had another sister that was 5. And I had another sister that was a newborn at that time, and I was the oldest child. So, you know, you kind of caught between, do I save my siblings or I stay here and save my mama, you know?
So being a 7-year-old, and then your mom and your father trying to work through that.
Right.
So I understand, too, there was, like, some mental illness also?
Yes. Basically, I would hear... You know how back in that day we didn't sit around while you don't sit around while grown people talking. I would catch snippets of conversations. Someone said that someone had put something in my drink, in my father's drink. I'm sorry, and another person would say that it was a nervous breakdown. So, you know, I didn't know particularly what it was.
Because mental illness, of course, as we know, is affecting so many people. Like when we look at today and all of the things that's going on, and people who are going into schools and taking lives of children.
Right.
What do you think caused your mom to stay?
I sometimes think that, you know, she was just as much a victim as everyone else in that I want my marriage to work. She married young. My mother actually got married on her 16th birthday. And so her father had died at 10. And so she had that gap there of really just her big brother being the male influence in her life. So you go from 10 to 16, and now I'm getting ready to get married. Of course, I want that to work.
You want that to work,
right?
And by all means, for sure. There was so much stuff in this book. I mean, when I say you put a lot into this, and I just want to thank you for just being so transparent.
Thank you.
And sharing your story.
It was hard.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I told my husband I felt like I was pushing a wheelbarrow up a hill that was full of bricks. You know, that's how hard it was to finally just come off of a story that you tried to conceal for so long.
And then you finally got it
And
out.
I finally got it out.
Finally got it off. So let me ask you this question. At what point did it become abuse? As far as the sexual abuse.
Okay, because I did allude to, like, in the beginning that even the physical, there was a factor of physical abuse there, because there were times when spankings or whippings or whatever require first aid. So the sexual abuse probably started when between 13 and 14, I can't remember the exact age.
And no one suspected anything?
No one suspected anything. I told someone the first day, and which, with that person being his relative, basically told me, you know, don't say anything about that. You take that to your grave. That'll kill your mother. So all the things that a child doesn't want to hear. So I basically just...
So in your mind, you probably was thinking,
this gonna kill my mama.
This is gonna kill my
yeah,
mama.
Exactly.
And
so.
I think that's where the issue is, because a lot of times, especially in the African American community, we have so much that we go through, but yet everybody's saying shh.
And so that's why I made that statement in the book, that it's sometimes I felt like an in-house mistress, because you're sworn to secrecy, which goes on in affairs. There's a level of betrayal there that goes on in affairs, and somebody know, but I don't have an advocate in the. So that's why I said that.
And then not only did that happen, but you ended up getting pregnant from the situation.
Yes, I did. And not knowing, you know, what is this going on with my body? Because I'm young. I was young at the time. And when that was revealed, you know, I was taken to a clinic in New Orleans for an abortion.
By your father?
Yes. Yes. So it was it's sort of crazy that no questions were asked.
A child predator can be anyone, a man, a woman, a teen, another child, or as we see in Sharetta's case, even your father. When a teenage girl gets pregnant and no one is paying as the father, why do we not ask questions? When a teen boy or girl changes up their patterns and become promiscuous, is it always just raging hormones, or is it a learned behavior that they've been introduced to by a predator? We owe it to our children to educate them on abuse and to talk to them about the things that we've endured in our past, so that they know what's right and what's wrong and how they can report things when they too are being preyed upon. And if you are a person who's going through abuse in any form, know that there's nothing wrong with seeking help. Talk to someone, your counselors, your friends, because when you speak, you break the silence. And when you break silence, you break the chains that bound you because of the abuse. I'm Dreka Shevon, and this is another episode of I Am Ready to Talk Now. Follow us on social media, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram on Primestone Entertainment. On next week's episode, we go a little deeper into living with the effects of abuse.
A lot of times we walk around and we have a lot of baggage.
Right.
Whether it comes in the form of insecurities, comes in the form of shame, guilt.
I had to think back, what did I do to cause it?
Even with dealing with the abuse, Sharetta could not let it stop her. She made up in her mind that she would get past the abuse and that she would live a better life.
At what moment did you say, enough is enough?
Find out next week on I Am Ready to Talk Now, a platform that gives a voice to the victims and survivors who have faced extraordinary circumstances. Are you ready to speak?